Welcome everyone. I love it when you type in where you're zooming in from and telling us about the weather, about this big beautiful planet of ours. It's fun to see. My name is Meryl Como. I'm an independent artist, also the founder of Gather, which is a month-long series of events, textile and fiber events that will take place in the month of April in Greater Boston. I'm also a member of the SDA Events Committee, and SDA is a membership nonprofit focused on contemporary fiber and textile art, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this week's Textile Talk, Friends with Fiber. Textile Talks webinars are brought to you by the International Quilt Museum, Quilt Alliance, Studio Art Quilt Associates, and Surface Design Association. First, we'll have a few housekeeping announcements. This is a webinar. Your screens and mics are not active or showing. We welcome questions, which we'll answer at the end of all of the artist presentations. Please submit them in the Q&A box, which is located at the bottom of your screen. We're honored to bring you free and inspiring textile talks and respectfully ask that you be courteous as you engage with speakers and panelists and moderators and other participants. Your chat comments can be seen by everyone. So again, please use the Q&A for questions. The chat box is for greeting others as you were using today as you were signing in, and the survey for commentary or ways we can improve. If you prefer not to see the chat notifications that pop up, you can click on the chat button and you can toggle them on or off. So today we celebrate the publication of our Winter Surface Design Journal, which again is Friends with Fiber. We'll hear from artists Andrea Loyer, Maedeh Tafvizi, and Matt Johnson, all of whom experiment beyond the confines of medium to create innovative work that offers new perspectives on fiber. As written by Surface Design Journal editor Elizabeth Kozlowski, artists are natural explorers, drawn to experimentation in concept, material, and technique. Friends with Fiber celebrates those individuals who push the boundaries by combining disparate materials and techniques in exciting new ways. For example, clay and fiber appear to be great friends. Perhaps it is the tactile qualities or the malleability of each medium. Dare I say they go together like peanut butter and jelly? This issue also includes artists who have stepped outside their comfort zone to embrace the media and techniques of fiber art. Friends with Fiber is really about recognizing the power of fiber when activated by artists' hands. So SDA journals are published quarterly and available as full color print publications and in digital form. Check them out. So our first presentation is today. Our presenter is Andrea Loyer. Andrea is a Peruvian artist based in Los Angeles, blending color and dynamic movement with a background in fine arts and textile design. Her art spans multiple mediums, including sculpture and graphic design, reflecting her passion for material innovation. Rooted in themes of spirituality and self-discovery, Andrea's creations are designed to elevate spaces, offering a sense of transformation and connection. So Andrea, we look forward to seeing your presentation.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Meryl, for the introduction. Let me share my screen. Just a second. Oh, wait. Can you see it?
Now we can.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So hi, everyone. My name is Andrea Loyer, and I'm a Peruvian fiber artist. Today, I would like to share a little bit about my work, my practice, and my inspiration. I have a BFA in fibers from the Savannah College of Art and Design, where I explored textile production in depth, everything from weaving, knitting, dyeing, to digital design. Also, before SCAD, I studied visual arts in Peru, which gave me a really strong foundation for sculpture, painting, and installation design. This blend of fine art and technical knowledge in fibers has shaped my approach to textiles to see it as a medium for continuing exploring the infinite potential of material. So, my work is a node to my personal journey with spirituality and introspection. I base the aesthetics of my work on research in the energetic field, mostly regarding color, shapes, and movement. So, I think my work is a clear representation of the energy that surrounds our bodies and the powerful capacities of it. With my art, I intend to create this kind of narrative that invites others into the exploration of the self and to be aware of these unseen energies around us. So, my process is deeply rooted in research and experimentation. I'm always trying to approach each project with a deep sense of curiosity. So, I really love raw and flat material, and my curiosity is always striking to ask myself, how can I take the material to the next level? So, I really like to mix materials, technologies, processes, and see how they react with each other or even with the environment. Most of my work in school was basically samples and lots of testing, which I really enjoyed to do. And I remember my friends had these like beautiful giant weavings or finished projects, and I had hundreds of little samples, tons of research and testing. But I really enjoy keeping myself curious and educated on every technology I can get my hands on. So yeah, I really enjoy this a lot. One of my most interesting projects is my exploration with bioplastic, which I talked about in my article for the Winter Journal. So my senior thesis in school was based on capturing the aesthetics of the unseen energy surrounding us, and they can also be known as auras. So I experimented with a lot of different materials like plastic, paper, fabric. I even did sculpture, metal too. But none of these materials captured the essence of the auras like I was imagining to. So I discovered bioplastic in my whole process of exploring different materials. And sadly, I didn't choose bioplastic because of its biodegradable qualities, but because it was super malleable when the material was still wet, and it portrayed the essence of an aura in a beautiful way. So this project is actually invisible to the naked eye, but it's always in constant motion too. So the bioplastic gave me the transparency, the movement, and the fluidity of auras, not to mention the beautiful colors and the light reflection, as you can see in the picture. Is my favorite. I think this piece portrayed exactly the movement and fluidity of an aura. It was super light and reflected the colors and the light beautifully in the space. So I really enjoyed this project a lot. And then continuing with the concept of unseen energies, I explored this time with a more technological or industrial based project. So I created digital prints based on my research in the energetic field and portrayed them in large scale acrylic pieces. So first I laser.
Andrea, I'm sorry to interrupt, but your video keeps freezing, so I'm just going to turn it off. So hopefully we can hear you through the connection. Please go ahead. I think we lost her. So there we go. Sorry about that, Andrea. Could you try sharing your screen again and we'll turn off your video camera?
Yeah, sure. Sorry about that.
That's okay, it happens.
Okay, I hope you listened what I was saying about this one. But the aim of this project was to create large scale pieces that would interact with people. So these pieces were hung from the ceiling in an installation. They were hung by a thread. So they had this really gentle movement, and people could feel the pieces closer to their bodies and mimic auras in some way. This project was really interesting, and it's one of my favorites so far. And I'm also proud to share that this project was shortlisted in the Arts Thread Global Creative Showcase in 2024. So I'm thinking of expanding this project and trying out different shapes, colors, textures, and different prints too, based on my research. And here you can see a close-up of the pieces and how the acrylic portrays the beautiful color in the supposed auras I was trying to recreate. And yeah, that's all. Thank you all so much for listening to my journey and exploring my work with me. My hope is that my work inspires curiosity and encourages us artists not to only explore the materials we interact with, but also to explore the energy and questions ourselves about our energy and the energy that moves us from within to create. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. And I wish I could roll my R like you do. Now our next presenter is Matt Johnson. Matt is a self-taught artist who began a practice of creating wearable assemblages in midlife. Growing up with a father in the military influenced his interest in the symbolism and messages conveyed by uniforms. His work draws on images and stories from mythology, folklore, and science fiction, and relies principally on reclaimed materials for its execution. He lives in Rockaway Beach in New York. And welcome, Matt. We're looking forward to your presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Meryl. Thanks, everybody, for being here today. Thank you, Rachel, for sharing my slides. We can get rolling. So as Meryl was just saying, for the past few years, I've been at work on a series of wearable assemblages, which I collectively refer to as cyborgs. These objects draw on images and stories from mythology and scripture, science fiction and horror, mergers between human and other, which transfigure both. They are constructed using textile and fiber art techniques, principally machine and hand sewing, as well as hand riveting and loom knitting, and almost exclusively with reclaimed materials, including media such as metal, rubber, glass, and rigid plastics. This piece, titled Full Metal Bandersnatch, coalesced around a plastic dome found in a thrift store's garbage, later to be augmented by secondhand firefighting gear, scrap fabrics, and my own household junk. Next slide, please. To varying degrees, these works incorporate or are inspired by elements of uniforms and armor. I attribute this to my fraught relationship with my father, a retired Army officer. Our family did not join him on deployments, so the material trappings of his service afforded what limited insight I had into his world. As a child, I regularly snuck into the attic to dress up in his retired boots and fatigues. Despite the cyborg's invocation of such archetypes as police officers and space explorers, their gaudy bulk and unpolished ostentation subvert canonical masculinities. Collectively, they embody the allure and the frisson of belonging, invoke my material signifiers of manly authority, as well as the precarity of being alienated from their ranks. Next slide, please. My conceptual work tends to emerge through manipulation of the reclaimed materials themselves, rather than aligning to an image already in mind. Fabrication typically demands extensive disassembly of those materials and cultivation of suitable techniques for rearticulation. While it is not an installment in the Cyborg series, this piece, titled Avenging Angel, is a close relative. It was inspired by the dozens of pairs of flip-flops uncovered in one of several contractor bags of crafting supplies donated to me by a neighbor, whose chronic illness prevented her from being able to put them to use herself. However they are sourced, these materials' histories transform the finished works into reliquaries. Next slide, please. In science fiction, a cyborg's key virtue is its ability to adapt and survive in defiance of long odds, as symbiote or as parasite, shedding whatever no longer serves those ends. In my personal cosmology, they, and I, are resilient stoics scavenging a world of depleted resources. The homespun qualities of the finished work mirror economies of labor and material, evidenced by mass-produced uniforms and equipment contracted by the military, which regularly have minor but apparent variations in color, texture, batting, and stitching in the same garment. Rather than being the sleek products of seamless technological progress, these cyborgs are Frankenstein monsters improvised based on what I have to hand. I liken them to the folk tradition of trench art, where civilians, combatants, and prisoners of war creatively alter and repurpose the leavings of conflict as art objects. Next slide, please. Work on the cyborgs has prompted me to undertake 2 lengthy road trips through the Midwest and South Plains to conduct archival and visual research into the institutions and locales that shaped my father's career. This research informs my ongoing work, expanding my preoccupation with mock militaria into hand weaving, quilting, and flag making. At the same time, driving down the same lonely prairie highways my father did as a young man afforded me some of the insight into his life that I had longed for. This newly completed piece, titled Behemoth, incorporates several dozen combat boot liners as the foundation of the work. These were sourced from a military surplus store in Lawton, Oklahoma, adjacent to Fort Sill, where my father was formerly stationed. As with the other work shared here, it is a portrait of a soldier whom I may never really know, and an avatar of the man I'm still becoming. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Matt. And next we will go to Maedeh Tafvizi. Maedeh is an Iranian ceramic artist whose work explores the intersection and material, identity, and environment. Growing up in the historic city of Isfahan, she was deeply influenced by its rich cultural heritage and intricate patterns, which continue to shape her artistic vision. Maedeh holds an MFA in ceramics from the Rhode Island School of Design, where she developed a conceptual approach to ceramics, blending traditional techniques and contemporary processes such as 3D printing. Her practice engages with themes of memory, sustainability, and human integration with space, reflecting her personal and cultural narratives. We look forward to seeing this.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me and being here. Thanks, Mario and Rachel, helping with this. My name is Maedeh Tafvizi. To tell you a bit about my background, I have a BA in Islamic art with focusing on ceramic, which I did it back home in Iran. And then I came to US at 2022 to do my MFA in ceramic from Rhode Island School of Design, which I finished it last May. Next slide, please. The city that I born and raised there, it's called Isfahan, which if you Google it, probably these are the photos that you're gonna see. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. These are just like some photos that I put together. And by telling you about the city that I raised there, I'm trying to give you some like information about my artistic journey and just like what I was surrounded as a children. Next slide, please. This is a video from the inside of Sheikh Lutfullah Mosque located in Nakhsh Jahan Square. which is absolutely amazing as an architecture building. And just imagine surrounding by all these. The thing is, it's almost impossible to walk in Isfahan and don't see any sign of art, culture, history, and tradition, which I was very lucky to have all those elements together. Next slide, please. And the other significant influence that I had when I was child, it was the fact that my grandfather owned a family business, which was the rug business. Unfortunately, when I was born, he already retired himself from that business, but there were still lots of rugs and also stories about them. The photo on the left side is the very small rug that my grandmother made it, and I had it in my bedroom in my parents' house. On the top left side of the rug, it's the signature of my grandmother, her first name and her last name. And also the photo on the right side is just like my mom and my niece that they are playing. For putting like these photos together, I kind of try to give you some sense of the vibe that I was raised in it. And with that architecture and also rug, I was always thinking about seeing rug as a type of architecture. Basically, rug has a specific dimension, a specific weight. It has inside and outside. It has the border. It can change the function of the space. It can define the function of the space. So by this kind of line of thinking, I started my master's in fine art in RISD. Next slide, please. And when I was starting that, I was really like passionate about having some like my background concept with my art, but my medium was ceramics. So I was starting about researching the relationship between textile and ceramic. And the result was very interesting in terms of both these mediums are land-based. Both these mediums are very appreciated by the human that they have access to them. And because they were very unique in terms of the accessibility that people has to have it, the craft or the art that made out of these two different medium are also very unique. Next slide, please. So I started to first find the clay paste that I want to work with it, which I ended up to having the Egyptian paste. Next slide, please. These are some like a textiles and some like a different ratio and like formulation of the Egyptian paste to tell about the Egyptian paste for the friend that they probably like interested in ceramic or know more about ceramic. It's very interesting in terms of the firing because it's just like a single firing clay paste. It doesn't need to have two or more than two firing. It's a self-nature clays. And it's very low firing. So in terms of the sustainability purpose that I had in my mind, it was like very satisfying to use with this paste. But the other challenge that I had, it's basically I should make it. There is no like commercial Egyptian paste that I can order it and have it in my studio. After I find the recipe, the ratio, the firing temperature that I want to work with it, I started to focusing on the textile part. Next slide, please. Which I end up to having the Zilu, which is one of the very first tapestry that we have in Iran. I chose Zilu because it has a kind of like a simple pattern, minimal design, which helped me a lot because I'm not master in textile. So it was easier for me to catch it, to like understand it easier, to work with it easier. Next slide, please. Most of the Zilu, they are just like a two color, either blue and white or green and white. The function of them was like mostly for flooring the mosque. And as you can see, the pattern they have is like very simple and like very minimal. And next slide, please. And last year, I was very lucky to have this chance to travel to back home and visit one of those Zilu studio and actually see the loom that they are using for weaving the Zilu and also the pattern that they have. So I started to take those patterns, study them, and turn them to the 3D modeling. Next slide, please. These are like some photo of my studio by that time. like a different photo of the architecture, Zulu, some like a different tiles of the firing samples of the Egyptian base. Next slide, please. And then I started to 3D printing the 3D model of Zulu, which Egyptian base. Next slide, please. I print them as a cylinder shape, and as you can see, they have a different pattern inside and outside. I designed it in that way just to give myself more space to play with them for the installation part. Next slide, please. But after I print them as a cylinder, I was like cutting them as a bar or like as a tile shape. And they are just like sitting in my studio and waiting for firing. Next slide, please. More photo of the progress. Next slide, please. And this is a video after the firing. As you can see, they are like has the both clay feature and also glaze shiny feature, which is very fascinating and interesting by Egyptian paste. Next slide, please. And this is very final installation that I had. The installation is almost 6 feet by 8 feet. And I really want to talk about the title of this project, which I call it Grief Resonance. When I was studying about the rugs and tapestry in Iran, I found an article that they were talking about the women that when they are losing their beloved ones, they start weaving the rug just as a symbol of keeping their memory alive. And it was very, very fascinating by me because basically they are forcing themselves to sit behind the loom and keep thinking about that beloved person that they lost it and have a repetition of the pattern and weaving the rug. And at the end, have the piece, which is always keep their memories alive. So when I read that article, I was like, this is exactly what I'm doing. This is exactly that's me sitting with my feeling and basically doing my briefing about home and missing home. That's why I call this project Grief Resonance. And the other next slide, they are just like some more detailed photo of the installation. And next slide is like more detailed photo. That's it. Thank you so much for having me today.
So now we will enter the part of the program where we ask questions. And you might even have questions for each other. I'll just check in and see, does anyone on the panel want to ask someone else on the panel? Andrea, you can join us when you get a chance.
I don't know that it's a question, and it may be something that members of the audience may be interested in weighing in on too. But Maedeh, I love the resonance, I think, between your work, like working through grief and sitting behind the loom, and a lot of the work that I'm doing. I think it's, I'll make the implicit explicit is also about a grieving process too. I don't know that I have more to say about that, but I, really appreciate hearing that, and the work is lovely.
Yeah, I do think there's connections between all three, the impulse to make and the thoughts about, the underlying concepts. Oh, hi. I'm so glad you're back, Andrea. I'm going to start, I think, with you, Matt, and ask you, one of the things that you mentioned about when I researched you is survival and resilience. And I've wondered, when you create these characters, as they're becoming more and more powerful and alive, are you able to sort of take on and embody some of that resilience and survival that these pieces seem to communicate?
That's definitely the goal. It's the funny thing about the work is that, like, in the portraits that I've just shared with you all, they that sense of fully embodying that, and like having access to that power is really apparent. I'm always aware though of the disjunct between or the power gradient between like the things that I'm making and also like positioning myself within them. And that gradient shifts in either direction. Like sometimes it feels like, the cyborg has the upper hand, and then I have to remind myself, oh, but I made you. So yeah, I definitely do feel it, but like that sense of mastery or authority is it's very slippery.
And Andrea, there's a question in the Q&A that is similar to one of the questions that I sent you that I would be interested in as well. It's very specific about, Susan is asking, she's telling us that she's reading Teilhard de Chardin, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, who points to the seen and unseen in the material world. And she would like to know more about aura and aura, spelled two ways, which, to her seems that that's what she's reading about now.
Yeah, I'm sorry, my Wi-Fi went on and off, so I cannot read the
It
question.
happens. It happens.
Sorry
I'm
about
glad you're back.
yeah, so yeah, I read the message. I haven't read that, but if you would like to know more about auras, the easiest way I can explain is we have in our body 7 main points of energy, also known as chakras, and our auras are a reflection of the energy those chakras like emanate light. So each chakra has a different color similar to the rainbow, and when it depends on like which chakra is more open or more closed, depending on how aligned or how you receive the energy around you. So that's how I see aura, the reflection of the light of the chakras. And the color depends on your mood, on your state, on your energy, your environment.
Lovely. Lovely. Maedeh, I'm wondering about your I feel like your references have both a intimate reference, personal and intimate and domestic reference, as well as this very large communal reference to the architecture. And when you're doing your work, are you finding your place within that world? Are you asking us to think about where we are in that world? And so what is your sort of your personal journey through that?
Before responding your question, thank you so much, Matt, for your nice work. And to respond your question, like the journey that I had, it's the start as my personal like heal or personal grief. But what I had at the end, it was like more communal. Like when I started sharing my story, having my piece, even when it was like in the progress stage, not necessarily the final installation, I found actually people that they are like clicking with it, not necessarily people from the same background, from the same location, from the same like age. I found actually they are like understanding the feeling of losing home, which doesn't mean like necessarily physically, but both conceptually. And not necessarily about like some like a political, it can be like very personal, like feeling that you might have about your homes or what does mean homes. So I started very personally, but at the end it was very communal. And now when I want to get back to work on it and expand that project, probably I'm gonna more focus on the communal inspiration rather than the personal, because now I'm more confident that actually people can like get what is my point and like make that relationship that I was hoping to have.
Yes, I definitely think people will are responding like
Yeah.
with.
Yeah.
I'm getting a lot of technical questions in the Q&A, and my suggestion would be about 3D printers and so forth and materials. And my suggestion would be that we have people connect directly with artists and reach out to artists directly, DM them. Their Instagrams are on in the chat, and ask them technical questions there, because there's quite a few of them for me to run through, and I don't want to pick one over, prioritize one over another. So I'm going to go back to let's see, where am I going? Back to Matt. And we're hearing with all three of you about engineering and science, right? So Matt, I wondered, in the engineering, for your engineering, it's really this construction with materials that have qualities that you're not necessarily choosing for their qualities, but are collecting and need to respond to their qualities. And so I'm wondering, as you're working on these characters, do you go out with would you start with one idea, and does the character of the characteristics of this character change as you're incorporating or discarding or learning how to use materials?
It really is. It's been a journey learning through all of them, and each one is certainly a journey in itself. Most of these are executed over a period of weeks, sometimes months. I've definitely been in situations where I thought I had a plan and then had to back out of it because it clearly either wasn't going to work, it wasn't giving the look or the effect that I wanted, or it simply wasn't structurally viable. I've had to go back and remediate stuff a few times. Um, there's not a lot of and certainly initially with the early ones, there was not a lot of like, well, I know that I can do X, Y, and Z, and I'll be able to achieve this because I've done it before. Because at that point, I hadn't done it before, and the the attraction of the materials and like the relevance of what I'm able to see in my mind is really, it is paramount, meaning that like the techniques are secondary. And because I don't have a lot of formal training, I've had to cultivate those, you know, largely independently, and with mixed results. And over time, I've been able to refine the technique more and more, and anticipate like what would be effective, and like recognizing materials that are similar to ones that I've already used, like and knowing with some confidence that I can I can achieve a desired end. But all these things are also unique. Like I'm never working with the same materials twice because I often don't have the same set of materials twice. So every single opportunity is every single one of these is an opportunity to learn or relearn. And the engineering challenge is not it. It's not driving me as much as the materials themselves are, but like it's a huge component of the of the work, of the labor of it.
Right, of the process. Yeah, it's nice to think that you can be learning all the time, but you're also developing mastery. So you can
Yeah.
reuse before, but you can have a new material and learn a new way. Andrea, I have a question that's come in on the Q&A, which is also about sort of about your personal journey. So this is from I think is Zaida or Zeta, who is a sophomore at SCAD and is very curious about how you, in your journey, how did you come to the point where you're at, where you have a passion about a particular methodology and material, and how did it become your career? She's asking.
Wow, what a deep question. Um, I think I've always had this fascination for materials. Even when I studied visual arts here in Peru, I was always trying to make something unconventional. Like I did traditional painting or sculpture, and I was always trying to include certain materials or elements that were not traditional. And I encountered with fibers at SCAD by magic, I think. And I felt that studying fibers gave me the space to play and interact with tons of different materials, and not to only marry myself with one profession. So I think I do like everything. Like I can use wood or metal or plastic weaving, like many different techniques, and it's not all confined in textiles per se, but also a world of or infinite materials that you can clay and create and play. And I think it's fascinating, and that's why I chose that passion of mine, I think. And it's always about testing. So my techniques now may change in the future too. So I'm always exploring.
I imagine it's quite exciting to think that there's a wide world of materials, and also at times overwhelming.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit what's happening probably to our student that's trying to figure out a pathway. It can be really overwhelming, and how far do we need to narrow down? and how wide can we go? And I love the fact that you're basing things in testing, testing the materials in your world, which I think you have in common with Maedeh. And one of the things I wondered about your work, Maedeh, is the rug is soft, right? And the rug is we interact with our bodies with the rug, and then you're creating this rug that's in a harder material. And first of all, one of the questions was really, the fringe looks like it's fiber. Is that right? All right. And then the ceramic is integrated with that fiber. And I wondered, what do you ever think about the body's experience with your product, with your artwork?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the very first thing that we are experiencing in ceramic. Not necessarily me that I'm focusing on textile, but I would say like any person that they are experiencing with clay as a material is like a very live material. It's like a dogleg between you and the clay. It's like an interaction and action, interaction and action. And when I like kind of like combine it with the other medium or material, which is textile, which is also soft, but at the end, the goal is like having something strong to sit on it or like have furniture on it, you know? So I kind of felt like when I was talking about the relationship between textile and ceramic, one of the points was exactly this. Both of them have this duality inside of them. Both of them start with a fragile, thin, soft material, but at the end, the purpose of that is like having it for last long.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's lovely. All right. For a question for all of you, Janie would like to know, do any of you use a journal or sketchbook in your process of developing your work?
I don't use a journal specifically, but what I do is I always start my projects with an intention or a goal, and sometimes I can kind of sketch or write about the concept I'm going for. But I don't use it as like a book of rules that I need to follow. It's like a loose idea, and I try to keep my process pretty random and pretty open in my day-to-day decisions while working on the project. But I kind of plan a certain goal or intention for what I want to portray or the concept I want to work on.
Anyone else?
My answer would be it wasn't any like journal in the meaning that everyone probably know that, but again, working with ceramic, it's kind of giving you a calendar, you know, there's some certain point of drawing fire in working with it. So because of the material, I already have that like calendar or whatever. But the other thing I was like, what I did a lot when I was working on this project almost for 10 months, like every night before leaving my studio, I was taking photo of what I did on that day. And when I get home before sleep, I was just scrolling those photos, which sounds silly, but it helped a lot.
Mm. Oh,
Yeah.
I do that all the time. I go to the studio at 11 or whatever, because I
Yeah,
think as you're dreaming, your mind is solving, solving
exactly.
and expanding.
And when you're in a studio, you're like surrounded by your piece, and I kind of feel you can't see your piece, but when you have that like distance and like having it from the different direction on your floor, it's kind of like easier to like, to
Yeah,
understand. Yeah.
lovely. Matt, did you
Are you,
want?
yeah, no, I use a lot of reference photos as well, and sometimes, very often, I only really have notebooks as far as like design and construction practice. I just have like a stack of scrap paper that I keep, on my work table, and as I need to like describe measurements or how things are going to interact or how they're going to be attached together, I will do like jot off quick sketches of those and then just kind of shove them in a folder and forget about them. I'm actually in the middle of a residency now, and one of the goals of that residency is to demonstrate the work in progress, which has meant that I've had to get a lot more deliberate about sketching stuff on a regular as I'm working, and then like tacking it up to the wall of the studio just so that people can see what I'm doing. But yeah, it's at I have a pretty regular like journaling practice where I write extensively about the conceptual aspects of it, but the actual like process documentation tends to be a little more slipshod.
Mm. Yeah, I think you have lots of concepts, that are embedded in the work. And, and one of you're talking that you're in a public spot now where you're having to communicate, through sketchbooks about process and so forth. But I wondered, you have mentioned the phrase, it has a homespun. Your work has a homespun feeling to it, which, I would say is evidence of hand. I know someone made it, and I wondered if, when you're interacting with the public, the responses you're getting do people just, strangers, want to talk to you to find out why you're dressed the way you are, and do children, are children drawn to it, and also, do you feel like you are communicating the deeper concepts behind the work, as well as just the fun of the visual?
Well, at first, our kids love it, and I get excited when there are kids around. I showed several of these works in a group show in New York about a year ago, and it was in a community gallery in a space that also hosted a lot of children's cultural programming. And the kids had to walk through the gallery in order to get to like the dance room or whatever. And I'd be in the gallery, and just like these little kids would be walking past and looking at them like just like unable to tear themselves away, which is like was really really thrilling for me. Um, because the thing is, they're whiz bang wow, and I do occasionally wear them a hook. I did a lot of that during COVID, but this kind of emerged from a weekly practice I had during COVID of like making a new dress, making a new costume, and just showing up in public with it every week in a place where I knew would friends would be, and we could spend time together, and that kind of evolved into what you see today. Um, I'm As I've worked on that, like I've started asking myself the question of why this thing exactly? Why am I making these things? Why do I keep coming back to these same concepts? And that's kind of driven the impulse to think more about my family and my history with my dad growing up, and learn more about him. So there is definitely there's a more somber dimension to the work that I think escapes people on first glance. That said, I do have people who like will say things like, well, why did you make a police officer? And that's a totally legitimate question. Like, and it's not, my intention is not glorification of like a personage or of a profession for any of these. But it's also to show this sort of like mixed reactions of you know aversion, but also a kind of desire, because like I feel that ambivalence towards every one of these myself.
Yeah, I could see that. I can see that. Andrea, I want to say that I looked at some of your work that in the journal and is three-dimensional, and um, you have one slide where two ovals were coming up, and there's a blue in the middle of one of those ovals. That as I was watching your slides, I was thinking, I think that's pulsating. There is a strong sense of movement in your work. And I'm wondering, I wondered as I was looking at your work, do you dance? Do you watch dance? Do you, because the movement of the colors is really phenomenal.
I don't formally dance, but when I do, I think I feel in my purest essence. And I think it's when I'm most connected with myself. And most importantly, I think it keeps me creative. And movement as an element in my work is, I think, a vital part of being alive and a clear reflection of the energy, the constant energy that I'm talking about. So there's always have to be some kind of movement in my work. It's an integral part of my work, I think.
Yeah, I think there are tensions in your work between perception of movement, because the colors are moving, and the fact that the material is in stasis at a certain point. Those two connections are really fascinating, so to see.
Yeah, I think I try to balance well the movement and the unpredictability of the sculptures in my work with control, because I think that in a way mirrors myself and my creative process too. As I said, with a journal, I don't always plan what I'm going to do, but I always set an intention, but I keep my day-to-day decisions pretty open, pretty random. Sometimes I let the material and the process guide the whole project. So I think it's part of like a beautiful dance between chance and intention. So I try to reflect that in my work as well.
Yeah, I think you can see it. Maedeh, I'm going to ask you one more question, I think, and that is, you have a cultural impact on the way that you see the world and you think and how you experience your surroundings. And I'm wondering if, going through your education and creating this work and using this new material, it feels in some ways honorific, of where you've come from. And you had like imagery that you were communicating with us what your childhood was like, the things that you saw in your childhood. So in some ways it feels honorific. And I wondered if during the process of really stepping back and looking at where you came from and, playing with materials, did you change your relationship to your background at all?
Um, yeah, I can say it changed a lot, but honestly, I see it because of probably just my life experience that I can say everyone has it. I'm not sure if it changed through my piece. It's kind of like connect me to my background rather than change my relationship to my background. But in general, to answer your question, yes, that relationship changed. But the piece just helped me a lot to connect back and just admire what I have in my back home city, in my family, like heritage, in my like parents' house. It was like more connection rather than changing, if that
Mhm.
makes sense.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's lovely. Matt, I was going to ask you too, do you find that in doing your work, you are making sort of headway into a more peaceful relationship with your childhood or your past?
I'd say so, yes. It's definitely I it's helped me, I think, on, I mean, maybe not in a deeper way, but like in a different and a more uplifting way than, say, like, therapy has. Although I've benefited from both. I think part of what it reminds me is that you know that like that joy and wonder that I felt as a kid is something that, like, even if I have more complex feelings about it now, that it's something that I can still tap into and learn more from, and celebrate and show off in a way that as a kid, like, I was probably would have been more inhibited about doing. So it's nice to have that.
Yes, it is. And it's amazing how everyone is at a certain point in their journey in here today. Everyone is at a certain point, and it's sort of no matter at what point or at what age there's still layers of this onion that you're peeling back, you're making sense of where you came from. So it's wonderful the way that your work is so integral to this, and that you're all communicating about where you are at and how you're responding to the world and thinking about it. So I'm going to do a few closing remarks. You stay on, and actually, while I'm doing the closing remarks, you guys should check out the chat, because there's some lovely things being said in the chat about your work. And once we say goodbye today, you won't be able to find them. But so I do want to thank our panelists who are so interesting, and it's been so much fun for me to learn about them and have this conversation with you all today. I also want to thank I want to do a thank you to our sponsors. Because of our sponsors is why we're here today. The recording will be available on YouTube and next week. And next Wednesday, the Textile Talk sponsors Studio Showcase, a conversation with Judy Kirpich and Karen Schultz, which is hosted by the International Quilt Museum. So thank you, everyone, for all your contributions today. From those of you that are attending and have had questions and comments, thank you. And especially thank you to our incredibly rich and unique and creative panelists.